All right, good evening, councillors, City of Melbourne officers, the public gathered here this evening in the gallery, and to those people who are tuned in at home, including Councillor Owen Guest, who is joining us virtually. Good to see you there. Can I begin, as I always do, with an opening acknowledgement of country? And given the historic import of today, I will commence by saying that earlier today, the Victorian Government made an historic apology to Aboriginal Victorians. The apology acknowledges past injustices. The Premier said sorry for laws that took away land from Aboriginal people, laws that removed children and broke families, victims of the stolen generation, laws that erased First Nations culture, and for violence committed under the banner of the state and the colony that came before it. This morning's apology was among the first public actions taken following the signing of the state's treaty agreement last month. Both the Labor Premier and the Liberal opposition leader recognised past injustices the state of Victoria imposed on Aboriginal Victorians. The treaty is Australia's first modern treaty agreement with Indigenous Australians. The Council would like to recognise this historic moment. And to say, as Lord Mayor, that I am committed to ensuring the City of Melbourne builds a better future for First Peoples. In doing so, I would like to read a short excerpt from the treaty's preamble, and it reads, "We stand together, committed to a better future, one that is just, fair and equitable and honours the rightful place of First Peoples. Treaty is how we make that future possible." And of course, we are holding this meeting on Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung country, and I most respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we govern, the Wurundjeri, Woi-wurrung and Boonwurrung peoples of the Kulin, and pay respect to their elders past and present. We do indeed acknowledge and honour the unbroken spiritual, cultural and political connection they have maintained to this unique place for more than 2,000 generations. This meeting is being streamed live and the recording will be published on Council's website by close of business tomorrow. The unconfirmed minutes of this meeting will also be available from the City of Melbourne's website as soon as practicable. I request that all mobile phones be turned off or to silent for the duration of the meeting. We move on to agenda item 2, disclosure of conflicts of interest. If any councillor has either a general or material conflict of interest as defined in the Local Government Act 2020 in relation to a matter to be considered by council, please disclose the type and nature of your interest prior to consideration of the item. Moving on to agenda item 3, confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. I call on a councillor to move a motion adopting the open minutes of council meeting number 13 held on Tuesday the 25th of November. I call for a councillor to move a motion. Thank you, Councillor Camillo. Looking for a seconder. Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor Campbell. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. It's a procedural motion. And looking for Owen Guest as well. And I declare that carried unanimously. Agenda item 4, matters arising from the minutes of the previous meeting. Are there any matters arising from those minutes and anybody wants to call out? None of our eagle-eye councillors have anything they wish to identify. Good. We move on to correspondence and submissions. The following submissions have been received in accordance with the Council's governance rules in relation to agenda item 6.2, quarterly performance reporting, finances and capital program Q1 25-26. We have an item of correspondence from Honorary Councillor Chris Thrum In relation to agenda item 6.4, proposed travel by Councillor Raf Camilla, we also have an item of correspondence from Chris Thrum. In terms of the status of confidential items, does any councillor wish to discuss the confidential status of any of the confidential items listed on the public agenda? No. Okay. In that case, we move on to agenda item 5, reports from committee. There are no reports from committee, so we move on to agenda item 6, reports from management, and there are 4 reports from management. The first of those, 6.1, Community Engagement Policy and Practice Review. Are there any conflicts in this item? I don't believe there are. In that case, would councillors like a presentation on this item? I don't believe we need one. So in that case, I would request our governance team to bring a motion up onto the screen. I believe there may be an amended motion coming here, so that, can we please keep scrolling? There we go. There is a amended motion.
No, that's not it, Lord Mayor.
That's one option. Is there a further amended motion?
The way I can see it. Here we go.
Councillor Guest, while we are moving the right things onto the right screen, can I just check that you can see the motion?
I can now, thank you. I've got there.
Good.
Cheers.
All right, so let's just have a look at this motion. Subject to inclusion of a commitment to enhance processes to engage with multicultural communities. Okay, is there more? Can we scroll down further? No, I think there's a... Yes, that's correct. I'm looking for them all on one amendment so we don't have to go round and round. Councillor Guest, just to let you know what's happening in the chamber here, my understanding is that
there we go. I get it now.
There are 3 amendments that have been proposed, and we're just trying to consolidate them all into a single amendment so that we can move them on bulk and save everybody a lot of their evening. And so we will just pause for a moment while that is occurring. Our Deputy Lord Mayor and our Head of Governance, David Thompson, are over at the desk just working away. Thank you, team. And there's Kirsty as well. We've got the best minds in Town Hall working on it, everyone. This is just like the old days at Town Hall.
Lord Mayor.
Councillor Guest.
Item, the component 7.5, could it please be adjusted to, as with the request in 7.1 where it says listening posts as a formal component will be done, so to remove the word explore and to just say that management, we will use the annual valuation rates and notices to incorporate surveys.
Look, as the mover, you can do that. I would find it challenging to second that, Councillor Guest, because I don't know what the cost of doing that would be. And so
we've management has said that it'll be negligible at $50,000 at the most.
I think if you include the word explore, that sends a very strong signal that councillors wish to see this occur, but it just gives us that little bit of wriggle room around the final form in which we go forward with it. You're the mover, councillor Guest.
Yeah, I don't want to put the word explore in there.
Councillor
Thank
Lewis,
you.
the mover.
Is councillor...
I,
That's your
I, want, I want us to do it.
mover. So
Oh,
it's up to councillor Gladys Liu.
Could I ask a question, Lord Mayor?
You may ask a question at any stage, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Has management provided any advice on what is permissible to include with a rates notice?
Thank you for your question, Deputy Lord Mayor, and through you, Lord Mayor. I believe primarily it's a governance question, so I'm going to refer that to David Thompson.
Through you, Lord Mayor, it's at the discretion of council to include whatever flyer, information, additional documentation they wish to put out with the rate notices, as long as it is not misleading or confusing the ratepayers with respect to the rate notice, which is the prime and dominant purpose of the rate notices going out. But it's open to council to survey the community on any particular matter they so wish to do so.
Thank you. And then one further question is, would the cost of this be limited to the cost of replied paid envelopes? Is that where the $50,000 figure comes from?
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Again, through you, Lord Mayor, that's primarily a question for our Chief Operating Officer. I might also just ask you to reflect on inserts as well as reply paid envelopes, Mads, if you can.
Yeah. So what we discussed with Councillor Guest earlier was you can assume that the cost to return a SAE is around $1. 180,000 residents or ratepayers, if you assume a 10% return or a 15% return, and the cost of the flyers to insert into the rates notice in the first instance, it would be circa around the 50k mark. The higher the percentage of return, the higher the cost to council.
The majority of our residents are not ratepayers. Are you equating the number of ratepayers with the number of residents?
So I'm equating the number of ratepayers to the number of rates notices that go out.
180,000 rates notices.
That's my understanding, but I can confirm that with our property and rates team.
And most people would use a QR code and fill it in online and wouldn't use the reply paid envelope.
Which was the advice that I gave Councillor Guest, is that any insert would have a QR code on it as well, so you give people the choice of channel. If they use the QR code, then the cost to council is significantly lower.
Thank you.
Councillor David Griffiths has a question.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Question to management about, we've heard the $50,000 figure being the cost of the actual physical survey, but what is it possible to quantify what the cost of dealing with the data that we receive? If we're getting 18,000 surveys back, what would it cost us to process those, to actually make it in good faith? If we're asking people for their opinion, we presumably need to do something with it once we've received it. How would that compare to the scale of surveys we currently do, and what might the implications of that be?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Griffiths, and for you, Lord Mayor, that's a valid point, Councillor Griffiths, because what would be returned would be paper-based documents. They would have to be rekeyed into a system that would involve manual labour, and there would be a cost associated to that.
Hey, Councillor Phil Leilu has a question as well.
Thanks. Mans, and I don't know who else might be, can you just give me the cost of actually City of Melbourne running community engagements? Would that be more or less than the 50,000? From my understanding, City of Melbourne running community engagements usually have many FTEs, but also resources, marketing and everything, which I would say easily way over 100,000. So in this instance of 50,000 is actually cheaper. But also the fact is we actually give a good sample of the ratepayers who actually help contribute to the budget and everything like that. So can somebody give me an idea? We run so many community engagements where we have less than 500. I think I haven't seen anyone for less than 500, right, whatever. I'll just say less than 1,000. And in this instance, it's going to give us potentially more than that, and it's a very accurate way. So how is the fact that we would not be willing to do this when all the other community engagements we've had have actually had less than, I think, Councillor Owen, guess your quote was, we have more people working here at City of Melbourne than people actually replying back and everything. So can somebody give me a cost of all these community engagement that we've run?
CEO.
Thank you, Councillor Leilu, for your question, and through you, Lord Mayor. in terms of how much does a community engagement exercise cost, it's very difficult to put a figure on that because we do such a wide variety of types of community engagement and different scales and sizes. We do have Anthea Spinks here, who is our Director of Community Development, so I'm just going to invite her to provide any further commentary you might like, because it really does depend on the kind of activity we're undertaking. You might also have some insights, Anthea, on the overall cost, but if you don't, that's okay. We can take that question on notice. Thanks. Over to you, Anthea.
Thank you, CEO, and through you, Lord Mayor. Thanks for the question, Councillor. As Alison noted, depending on the scale of the engagement, it can vary in the cost. Currently, all of our engagements do, though, run through our survey platform, Participate Melbourne, which is the lowest cost. Obviously, we know, though, that the depth of an engagement yields often better and stronger insights. So for more complex projects or municipal-wide projects, we will deliberately choose to do some more in-depth engagement methodologies, which does add to that overall cost. But each project does vary depending on what the purpose of the engagement is and how deep that engagement needs to be to get the insights that we need to be able to present back to council as part of those recommendations on a project.
Follow up, I think just make it very clearly, so maybe this might be easier. How much did the last major community engagement survey we ran, and how much did that cost?
Thank you, Councillor Leilu. I'm again going to refer to Anthea, but I will just confirm that in some instances, the size and scale of the engagement activities is certainly above $50,000. But Anthea, any particular insights you might have there?
Nothing further to add, Alison. Thank you.
And just a final question from me, Mans. So I'm just looking for your level of confidence around the $50,000 figure, and what you think the range of cost would be around 50,000. If your best guess is 50,000, what do you sort of see as with a high degree of probability the range of likely cost would be? Because if we're committing to doing something, it's just good to know what we're committing to in terms of quantum.
Thank you for the question, Lord Mayor, and through you. The question I was asked when I provided the number was based on what would be the cost to return, to send and receive back a paper-based survey. We have just confirmed that the number of rates notice we send out is 142,000. So assuming a return rate of about 20% and $1 for the stamp, on top of that, the cost of the printing, just that alone would be circa $50,000. But to the question, Councillor Griffiths, to then process that data, create the insights, and then make it usable for decision making will require resources which would be in the quantum of running a large community engagement survey.
All right, but that would be also something we do in kind as part of the ordinary activities of a team in collecting feedback on a community engagement exercise. Is that correct?
That would be correct, but I would respond by saying it would be at the cost of not doing something else.
Okay, understood. Councillor Rouse.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just a quick question. What happens in the scenario where an individual owns multiple rateable properties? Would they have, therefore, multiple responses to give? And is that something that we can account for? Or do we as council just need to accept that any form of community engagement has its flaws and biases and we just need to take that into account in the decision-making process?
Thank you for the question, and for you, Lord Mayor. So I think the short answer is yes, it would go in the rates notice, and the rates notice goes to the property. So a landlord with multiple properties would receive multiple surveys. Part of the engagement processing process would need to factor in based on principles whether you would take it based on a property feedback or an individual feedback.
All right, Councillor Raf Camillo.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Can manager just confirm to me that this has never ever been done in council before? That's the first question. The second question is, consider they are the ratepayers and they are, we know the involvement they have with City of Melbourne, and consider the current surveys, we have very little control to know who's answered those surveys. Would it be very appropriate to be adopting this measure, considering that we already has the cost to send in there, even we can only use a QR code, and that would be a very potential and a well money spent from council and showing efficiency for or constituents, please?
Yeah. Mans, do you want to respond as best you can to that question from Councillor Raf Camillo?
Thank you, through you, Lord Mayor. My understanding is we haven't done that at the City of Melbourne before in terms of using the rates notices to collate feedback to surveys. As I mentioned before, if it was just something sent out with a QR code on the existing rates notice and that was the only mechanism we used to receive the survey feedback, then that would still be cheaper, but it would still be the same cost to then process that data to create the insights.
All right, thank you. Now, Councillor Ball.
Thank you. I think Rishta's not here, is that correct? So my question might be for Anthea, please. These two amendments proposed tonight, councillor listening posts and surveys sent with rates notices, are they something that management has considered in this whole process and not recommended, or is it not something that you've considered?
Thank you, Councillor Ball, and through you, Lord Mayor. The listening posts, definitely. We have referenced in the draft policy the fact that we would like to use more of listening posts, so I think this amendment strengthens a plan that we had been proposing to do ever since the council plan listening post activities and wanted to actually formalise an annual plan. Listening posts can be either standalone events or could be a listening post attached to a specific engagement. So this amendment will allow us to explore exactly how that program of work will come forward. So that one definitely has been considered through this process. The rates notice, I know there's been a number of different conversations, but we hadn't proposed it as a specific recommendation through the policy itself.
So you did consider surveys with rates notices and did not recommend it?
No, we didn't consider and not recommend. We understood that there were discussions around how you would use things like the rates notice or other things to elicit different forms of feedback. But it wasn't a specific recommendation that was attached to this policy.
Yes, so you did consider it and chose not to recommend it. Is that correct?
It wasn't considered to that extent through the development of the policy. It would be seen more as a procedural element that would sit underneath the policy potentially, depending on the decision of council.
And just to support Anthea's response to your question, Councillor Dr Ball, I think we can say that including consideration of the valuation rates notice as a mechanism to undertake surveys is a valid mechanism, and that is management's point of view. So even though it isn't explicitly called out as a recommendation, it's absolutely a valid mechanism by which to engage with the community.
Thank you, Alison. Councillor Mark Scott.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just a question through you, maybe to officers. Is it possible to print a simple QR code on the back of the rates notice without confusing or contaminating the communication piece under the governance rules as the sort of entry point for people to scan that QR code with their phone and respond? Because I would imagine that would elicit a far greater response of our municipality than filling out a paper form, putting it in a paper envelope, going to a post office, putting it in a post box and sending it back to council, and for us to receive thousands and thousands of bits of paper and have to process them.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Scott, and through you, Lord Mayor. I'm tempted to just say yes, and the answer is yes, that is possible. But I'd also just point out that with the amendment proposed as written in 7.5, all of the options that we have discussed are under the, are able to be considered as an opportunity for rates notices moving forward. So thank you, Councillor Scott. Yes, a QR code is also possible.
All right, now, as is the protocol here at the City of Melbourne, we look to our portfolio councillors in the first instance to move and second motions. I'm conscious that a number of councillors have contributed proposed amendments to now what is on the screen. So before we formally seek a mover and a seconder to what is on the screen, can I check with Councillor Gladys Liu and then Councillor David Griffiths if you are comfortable with the words that are on the screen? Councillor Gladys Liu.
Lord Mayor, there is a cleaner version that incorporate the amendments that we have, which has just been sent through by Jack to my email, and I don't know whether it is possible to have it put on screen rather than this one. This looks a bit messy, and Jack has a cleaner version with the 3 amendments all under 7.1. Rather than having Councillor Owen Guest's amendment down at 7.5.
All right, thank you for that, Councillor Gladys Liu. David Thompson has just advised me that it'll take up to 5 minutes to get that retyped as sent by Jack. It's the last council meeting of the year, everybody, isn't they've got things coming through at the last minute, which happens. That's fine. While the team are doing that, I'm being told that can be done more quickly than 5 minutes. I might see if Councillor David Griffiths is comfortable with the words that are on the screen as well.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I was more comfortable when they included the word explore, which had been discussed previously, but I am happy to second that motion.
So, Councillor Gladys Liu, if the word explore is put in as Councillor Griffiths is suggesting, would you be happy to move that motion?
Well, I would prefer not to have the word explore because I feel that Mans and Councillor Owen Guest have already talked about, and also the CEO, the possible way of implementing this.
Okay, well, you are the portfolio lead, so I'll give you the opportunity. I will see you first when it comes to opportunities to move the motion. Councillor Philip Leilu.
Question. Just in terms of putting in the word explore, can I just get a definition from those who want the word explore put in there? What does it mean? Because this is not something new. And so if you're saying, if we're putting the word explore using the rates as a way to engage community or surveys, I just want to know to what end. We can explore until next year, another year, in 4 years' time.
Sure, got your question. Alison
So
Layton,
can you please
CEO?
explain? Well, I don't know, it's the movers, other people who actually wants to put the word explore. So maybe, is it Alison yourself or who?
I think Alison wants to speak on this item.
Thank you, Councillor Leilu, for your question, and through you, Lord Mayor. It might be helpful for me to just outline that my interpretation of use the annual valuation and rates notice as an opportunity to incorporate surveys or provide feedback to council is that if passed, that motion would provide management with the obligation to come back to council with opportunities to be able to use the rates notice as a mechanism to incorporate surveys and provide feedback. That would then give council the ability to explore and evaluate those opportunities and make decisions about the extent to which they take up those opportunities. So for me, the inclusion of the word explore or the removal of the word explore will still be going away, looking at those opportunities and coming back and presenting them to council. It's a positive obligation on management by potentially removing the word explore. I'm just trying to sort of suggest that perhaps the inclusion or reduction of that word isn't really changing the overall intent of the motion too much.
Yeah, sure. If you've got a question.
I'll try to frame it. It might be for a way forward. It could be potentially might be a way forward that if we do put the word explore in there, we also at the end of the word the sentence actually say explore the opportunity, but making sure that before the next year's rate goes out. So therefore, it makes it very explicitly clear we explore at a certain time, but when the next time we go out, the rates go out, the decision will be made or incorporate so that the management is on a time clock. Now, I'm not obviously moving it and everything, and I'd be happy to stick to the one that doesn't explore.
All right, let's put that question to Councillor Gladys Liu. If with the amendment, if it included the word explore, but included a time period in which it must occur, i.e. for next year's rates notice, would that be something that you would be prepared to move?
Where is the word explore now? And the time?
And Lord Mayor, might I suggest for the FY 26-27 annual valuation and rates notice, just to simplify the sentence there.
And question to the CEO, just roughly what month is usually the 26, 27, when does it goes out?
I'd need to ask our CFO actually to remind me what month our first rates notice would go out in new FY 26-27 financial year.
I believe it's around the March time. March?
FY 26-27. The first rates notice is in March. No.
I could tell you, but I don't have my post office box with me at the moment.
Usually they due in February.
My understanding is it's in Q1.
Of the financial year. Yes, September, August, September, yeah. All right, so there we go. Are you comfortable moving that motion on the screen? Because I believe your councillor colleague David Griffiths would be happy to second it. All right, Councillor Gladys.
Sorry, that's the word, that's not the right. So explore use of the annual rates as an opportunity to incorporate surveys and provide feedback to council before the FY 26-27 rates notice goes out. Rates notice, and at the end, after notice, goes out. Space, or is issued, yeah.
And can we just start that sentence with a capital U and drop the explore?
You may have missed the last 5 minutes. I think we've got to a good place. Councillor Gladys Liu, are you happy to move that motion on the screen?
Yes.
Good. Councillor David Griffiths, are you happy to second it?
Yes, Lord Mayor.
There we go. Back to you, Councillor Gladys Liu, as our mover.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. And I want to thank all my colleagues, especially Councillor Dr. Owen Guest and also Deputy Lord Mayor, and all the councillor colleagues have been putting input into the amendment of this motion. As we can see, it is so important to engage the community so that we can provide the services that our citizens, our residents, I should say, residents, our businesses, including our ratepayers who are funding the operation of the council, all involved. So as the portfolio lead for community health and city services, I'm very pleased to move this amended motion before us tonight. Community engagement policy sets out our commitment to connecting with our community and clearly defines how engagement informs council's decision-making. Engagement is done best when it is transparent, objective, and most importantly, inclusive. And that's has been shown very, very well and clearly tonight. I'm particularly focused on ensuring we capture the voices of our whole community. That means everyone, including our multicultural communities. And that's why I put in the amendment there, and it is important to engage everyone. And equally, I also want to thank the Deputy Lord Mayor because a few months ago, we have trialed doing this face-to-face engagement, and it proved to be very, very well, and people were very willing to engage with us and telling us what is important to them and how we can do our job better. So getting back to the multicultural community engagement, and of course, as we know, here in City of Melbourne, 46% of residents speak a language other than English at home. And therefore, it is important that engaging with council is accessible and straightforward for everyone is most important. And we have to have ways to engage them in the language and ways and forms that people can understand. And also to Councillor Dr. Owen Guest, thank you for your amendment there, because I have always been thinking why we are not doing so. We have been sending rate notices to our ratepayers, and I don't want them to see us as only coming to ask for money, but I want them to see us engaging them and willing to listen to them. So this amendment to include what they think it is important is so important. So thank you for that. And I want to thank all the officers who have been doing the community engagement. Thank you for all the work that you have done. And definitely there are rooms for improvement. We can do better. And that's why we have this policy tonight. So very happy to move this motion. And I do look forward to hearing back from the community. As we can see, this is a draft motion, draft policy. So we look forward to seeing and shaping the final policy. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Liu, and thank you for your commitment and hard work in the community's portfolio over 2025. Councillor David Gris.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and I'm very happy to second this motion. I'll pick up from where Councillor Liu finished off with thanking management and officers for the very large amount of work that's gone into this. This has been a year-long project going through many iterations to arrive at this final draft, which we're going to release for community engagement if we pass this motion tonight. I really do want to recognise that the work that's gone on during that year has been intense and it's been well informed by a very large number of interactions with councillors, and even this motion itself, I think, has benefited, as Councillor Liu has said, from her own amendment, and I thank her for that, around the multicultural communities, and recognise the work of the Deputy Lord Mayor and Councillor Dr. Guest as well in their amendments. I think what we have seen through the questions that we're asking and the amendments that we've made, that there's a very, very strong commitment from this whole councillor group to making sure that we hear from all members of the community, and even during the council plan process that we went through at the beginning of this year through the Melbourne 2050 process led by yourself, Lord Mayor, it was great to see that broad focus on engaging as many people as possible, and particularly I was pleased out of that to see the engagement with young people who are not just the future of the city, but such voices that are not always included in those discussions. So it's fantastic to see a recognition of that, both in the processes we've gone through this year and also in this document here. I really hope that the community get around and are engaged with the draft community engagement document. There's a lot of good things in there, and it will be a better document when it's finalised if there is as much community engagement on it as possible. So with that list of thank yous and that beseeching of the community to be involved, I'm happy to second the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Are there any other councillors who want to speak to this motion? Councillor Philip Leilu.
Thank you. Look, I wasn't going to speak to it, but given the well, I think everyone's fired me up from that. So I think community feedback engagement is probably one of the most, if not the most important, because that's how we make decisions. Times and time, and while it has been in good intent and interest, the amount of scrutiny and also the amount of analysis that we had to make, because sometimes the data just did not make sense. There were many times where the data that was presented or presented to us, we have to query many times again. And it just shows sometimes the surveys, engagements, or the feedback we get sometimes is hijacked by particular groups who has a particular motive, and therefore does not actually reflect the particular interest of council. If anything, they are trying to hold us hostage or trying to make us go in a path where we know for a fact it doesn't exist. We were all elected in what is probably the biggest community engagement survey, which is the election. Some close to 100,000 people voted. And so we all know, and I think the quota was around about 10,000 per councillor group or whatever it is. So effectively we are representing 10,000 group, a cohort. And we know for a fact that this is important. A majority of them have the opportunity to vote because they are ratepayers. The fact that they contribute to the budget, they are the biggest contributor to our budget, contribute to the service. And yet to exclude them, but then yet we allow others who might not even have, say, we might not live here, and yes, they do visit, great. But to let people who do not contribute, or the fact that to this particular council over someone else who is actually contributing for the dollar and everything is just wrong. And I would say that, I hear to think about, what about all these costs? Okay, well, costs can be, again, I was to point to the fact that we spend so much more money on community engagement that only gives us a few hundreds of feedback compared to this, which will give us a very close idea. The fact that we're not going to willing to spend the money is crazy. If anything, I would say we should be using this as a particular ways or means of doing it than some of our other community engagement. However, I'm happy to have every other opportunity to engage that. We talk about how do we deal with data. Well, technology nowadays is actually very, very easy to use. AI will be able to do. There are technologies out there which scans every particular paper document. So if management or other people do not really know how to do it, I'm happy to recommend, or I'm sure there are firms out there who are easily able to provide a particular solution. 180,000 responses is actually not even hard. We're talking about firms out there performing 1 million transaction analysis per second. AI nowadays is actually doing more. We have more data centers than ever. The fact that we're not using any of that is ridiculous. If we can't handle 180,000 information transaction, we as an organization in this generation is actually wrong. So the fact that there are a lot of many other solutions. I know I've always been saying to us also as well that we should be using the rates. I thank my fellow councillors who's willing to put up the fight. I've been trying to do that, in my previous terms, but not able to. I still don't know why we want to do that. But the fact that now we can actually go ahead and do this just shows the achievements that we can achieve this particular term. So I want to thank Councillor Owen Guest and many of the others who put in the amendments. And I do hope that we will actually get the information that we want.
Thank you, Councillor Leilu. I think Councillor Olivia Ball wished to speak.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I really want to thank all of our staff who've done a huge amount of work on this and thank them for the quality of their work and their efforts to provide a genuine multiplicity of ways that the community can engage and their efforts and thought that's gone into ensuring that disengaged, hard-to-reach people are given the opportunity to express their views to council. I want to really thank Councillor Liu for her addition of the clause about multicultural communities. We cannot do too much. We can never do enough to engage with multicultural communities, with people with disabilities, with any other groups in our society who may be difficult to reach or have difficulty responding to us when they wish to. I just want to emphasise, and I don't think staff need to be told, but you don't buy influence in a democracy. So the idea that ratepayers should have more of a say or have a gold-plated access to council or that their views are more important or should be given greater emphasis than anyone else's is fundamentally flawed and anti-democratic. Most of our residents are not ratepayers, and even if they were, you don't buy influence in a democracy. Everyone's voices are equal. That is fundamental to a democracy. And as a capital city council, it's important that we embrace everyone who uses our city. It's a unique role as the centre of this great metropolis to ensure that we take into account the views of people who don't live here but use the city and access our services and have a justifiable say in their design. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dr. Ball. Councillor Raphael Camillo.
Very brief comment. I just want to support the words of Councillor Liu, and I'm very surprised this council never adopted that before in all these years. We are in 2026, and this council never considered use the notes of rates to be consulted for constituents and ratepayers. I found surprise. And now I'm just hearing from my colleague in there that we should not even consider that. So I feel a little bit frustrated, but I think this motion finally is going to represent the views of a lot of constituents, and I think we're going to the right path in here. And I just would like to mention that. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
All right, thank you, Councillor Camillo. Any other councillors want to speak on this item? Councillor Mark Scott.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just one final comment, building on everything that's been said, just reminding everybody that 77% of the population of the City of Melbourne is under 50. They all probably have mobile phones. Around 50% of the population of the City of Melbourne speak a language other than English at home. So we do need to understand that whilst it's a complex, multicultural city, we do have a young population who are all pretty tech savvy. So the fact that, as Councillor Camillo said, in 2026, we're talking about replied paid envelopes and paper surveys makes me worried, and $50,000 and $100,000 to conduct such a 20th century research methodology is a big concern to me. So I'll look forward to the options coming to Council that are 21st century options that are digitally proficient and uses all the things that Councillor Leilou said in terms of AI technology and data scanning and data analysis and all of that we have at our disposal. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that contribution, Councillor Scott. Would any other councillors like to speak to this item? I'm sorry, was that a hand going up there, Councillor Guest? No? Okay. Look, I'll Councillor Andrew Rouse.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. A short comment and then a question, if I may. Heartily agree with everything Mark or Councillor Scott has just said. One of the positives to come out of COVID is if my dad can now use a QR code, anyone can use a QR code, and he's watching tonight at home. That's how much his technology has improved. My question was to management as well, because I did hear a comment there, I forget who said it, effectively to the words of, this gives us another opportunity to find the data that supports our views. Can I ask management what options there might be in the future to bring someone who is an expert in data analysis to upskill councillors in their ability to look at the multiple surveys and elements of information that are given to a councillor. Sometimes that makes up the briefing paper, sometimes that makes up listening posts, as we've seen before, to ensure councillors are able to make decisions that are informed, based off the information and data provided, and with multiple sources of that data, making sure that councillors are best positioned to make that in a balanced and reasonable way for the benefit of the community.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Rouse, and through you, Lord Mayor. We're actually blessed here at the City of Melbourne that we have a number of data analysts and data scientists in our team. So as part of the ongoing progression of this draft community engagement policy, we can look to incorporate some of that information through our further briefings of Council. Thank you.
All right. Look, I'll speak briefly to this matter as well. I want to begin by thanking officers for all the work that has gone into this community engagement policy and practice review. It's fair to say it's an exercise that has attracted a lot of attention from councillors, which is a good thing in a democracy. And I want to say that I think our officers have risen to the challenge and have put forward a policy which is a very significant and important step forward for the City of Melbourne. And of course, it's a good thing as well that councillors take such an interest in this because we are very proud of the fact that we are the level of government that is closest to the people. We may not have the resources of the federal government. We may not have the legislative powers of the state government, but we do have one superpower, our secret weapon, and that is we are the level of government that is closest to the community, closest to our neighbourhoods, closest to the street. And so understanding what is happening out in our community is so important and is core business for us at the City of Melbourne. So making sure we get that right is absolutely mission critical. To that end, I agree this is an area that we always need to be looking for new ideas and new ways to innovate For example, when we had the 2050 summit here in this year, I think that was a real milestone moment for the City of Melbourne. It was an extraordinary gathering, and the Youth Summit and other consultative exercises that went around that were genuinely groundbreaking and a great step forward for the city. I want to thank councillors and the ideas that they have brought forward as part of this process. Councillor Gladys Liu, the idea of us being multilingual and engaging multicultural communities in our survey and community engagement exercise, that's a no-brainer. Well done for you for putting that forward. Deputy Lord Mayor, you have championed the listening post. Brilliant. Can't wait to get out there and kick the tyres with other councillors and officers in 2026. And Councillor Guest, thank you for bringing forward the idea of the survey as part of the Racing Office. Very good idea. Just another way, another channel to engaging with the community that we serve. I am taking it that as part of the options coming back, that it will be offer QR codes and other means of engaging off the back of that initial communication through the rates notice, and I'm sure it'll be both tech savvy while also taking advantage of that traditional channel of the rates notice. And so you put that all together, we get an outcome which is absolutely first rate, and of course means that we can better serve our community. So on that note, let's put the matter to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. I declare that carried unanimously. We move on to agenda item 6.2, quarterly performance reporting finances, capital program Q1 25-26. Would councillors like a presentation in relation to this item? No, I don't think there's any conflicts here. So we'll ask for a motion to please be put up on the screen.
I do have a question, if I may.
Yes, please, Councillor Dr. Ball.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So in the legal section in paragraph 22, it quotes the Local Government Act, which says that we must report as soon as practicable after the end of each quarter. And yet this report proposes moving from quarterly reporting to biannual reporting. And the reason given in paragraph 20 is that most of our indicator figures are annual, which would suggest that biannual is still not going to work. I know that in hitherto, if we don't have the figure, our reports say that figure is not available. It's not been updated since we last reported. So I'm wondering if it's best to stick to quarterly reporting, state when the new figures are not available, in accordance with our obligations under the Act, or if we're going to increase the frequency, why go to biannual rather than annual if your argument is the figures are generally annual?
Mans Bassey, our Chief Operating Officer, would you like to provide a response to that question?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Dr. Ball, and through you, Lord Mayor. So, Councillor Dr. Ball, I just want to clarify that the reporting would still be a quarterly report. What they're talking about is the majority of the strategic indicators in this council plan are annual metrics. So instead of just providing a number on a quarterly basis, what they're proposing is that we are more transparent from a governance perspective by calling out that the data for those annual metrics is refreshed biannually. So you would still have the metrics on a quarterly basis, but we're being much more transparent in that the data we're collecting to be able to update the progress is biannual. We're not saying the quarterly reporting would become biannual.
So we'll still get quarterly reports.
Correct.
And the figures will be updated as they are available in each quarter.
Correct. And we will
So
be
why
more,
would it be biannual? It would still be quarterly, and if there are no new figures to report, they won't be reported, and that's the current practice.
But which current practices? So in current practice, we're not calling out that those are biannual metrics. Sorry, and they're updated biannually.
Annually.
So currently we're silent. We just show a number which is the same number from previous quarterly reports that have not been progressed or updated. What we're proposing here is that those numbers will be clearly called out as annual metrics that are updated on a biannual basis.
How can you update an annual figure on a biannual basis?
Because the data we receive every 6 months allows us to show the progress. So what you would have is progress number at the 6 month point, the first biannual update, and then you would have the actual at the second point, which would be the Q4 report. So in effect, The annual metrics are updated in Q2 and Q4.
Okay, thank you. If this is more transparent, no less accurate, is that your assessment?
That is my
More
assessment.
transparent, no less accurate, then I'm very happy with that. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. If there are no further questions, I will look for a mover for the motion that is before us. Thank you, Councillor Guest. I will second. Back to you, Councillor Guest.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And I think rather the motion itself speaks for itself, but I think to Councillor Ball's questioning about process, it's been an interesting year, and for someone who's now a year into one's council experience and learning how things have been done here, I think one of the things I look forward to next year is some of the recommendations that we've been able to make to improve our reporting processes. And the key one, I think, that's relevant to this, if you read here, it says we're tracking well, we've spent $51.5 million against a planned $50.8 million, which does give one an idea. But as we've discussed behind the scenes, what we want to get to is what does that mean in reference to actual delivery? So I look forward to next year having some better metrics to show how our progress is going forward. But with that, well done all. Hopefully I'll get an opportunity to talk a little bit more about finance and governance before we finish. But it's been an interesting year and I'm happy to put this motion forward.
Thank you very much, Councillor Guest, and very happy to second this quarterly report. I think what's exciting about the quarterly reports at the moment is you can see the new initiatives that Councillor is undertaking in this term coming to life. So I did note that in his quarterly report we see that set to commence are our 3,000 free swimming lessons over the summer, plus the $2 pool entry at select pools on weekdays. We also see there that we're developing the new greening guidelines for nature strips, laneways and shared spaces. So this is your council at work, and in our quarterly reports we can see these fantastic new initiatives being stood up. Of course, we also see in this quarterly report that the Kensington Community Rec Centre, the Kenny Rec, has opened. We had the open day there, and of course we are moving on with construction around the QVM Trader Shed. 3 cheers to see that important project going ahead. And look, finally, great to see an underlying surplus and the fact that we're here debating an underlying surplus. That certainly was not the case here for many years, and it's a sign of the positive health that we now find the City of Melbourne budget. Still more work to do. Councillor Guest and I would agree with that, but yes, we end the year in a positive place. Any other councillors want to speak to this item? No, in that case, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. We declare that carried unanimously. All right, the next agenda item is 6.3, procurement of solar compactor bins. Do any councillors need to declare a conflict on this item? Any questions, need for a presentation? No, in that case, I will request that a motion be put on the screen. I believe that is the one. Looking for a councillor to move. Thank you, Councillor Raphael Camillo. Looking for a councillor to second. Thank you, Councillor Gladys Liu. Back to you, Councillor Camillo.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I also would like to extend a big thank you for Rick, Vince, Steve, and the whole team for the significant work that has been put in towards the procurement of solar compact bins. As everyone knows and walk around the city, what's the importance of those bins and what's the importance for them to be efficient and be very practical and help the community to keeping a clean city. As a portfolio head for the cleaning, I'm pleased to move this item, recommend the awarding of the solar compact bin service that will be contracted soon. We have around 500 solar bins currently in operation across the central city. Maintain and enhance the service is vital to keeping Melbourne safe, clean, and welcoming. It will also mean more efficiency with collections, improve OH&S, and outcomes and better overall value for the city. The procurement process has been extensive and include a trial which allowed our team to observe, test, and access all solar compactor beams models wireless operating Melbourne conditions. Those trial was done in Elizabeth Street, and myself, I went there many times, walk around, try different times of the day. So the procurement process, so in particular, pleased to see several improvements in the next generations of beans, including increasing capacity from 240 liters to 360 liters beans, enhanced odor control technology, and remote locking features that can help prevent overflowing when needed. That because overflowing is one of the main complaints we currently have. The new beams will also be built in a modular way so that all panels and parts are replaceable, which reduces costs when damage occurs. So these new beams will result in significant budget saving over the term of the contract, and I commend the motion before us tonight, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Camillo. Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I also want to acknowledge and thank the officers for the work on this item. In particular, I understand in the selection of tenders, the procurement process was really comprehensive, and they look at many things, including the price, which has got a very heavy weighting. Well, obviously, we have to very carefully use our money, the ratepayers' money, and also experience, capability, and past performance. This is important factors in judging the tenders, the planning, and the trial, as Councillor Camillo mentioned. Also the impact on local economic benefit and environmental sustainability. So all these factors were all very carefully looked at. So awarding this contract to the successful tender will deliver very strong outcomes for Melbourne. We have heard some of the advantages of these new beams will bring, including new and improved technology that will support more efficient services and, importantly, help create a cleaner and healthier city for all residents, businesses, and visitors to enjoy. So I'm particularly pleased to see that the procurement of these solar compactor beams has been a collaborative effort with some of the M9 councils. Once again, I want to thank all involved in this work, and I look forward to seeing these new beams rolled out across the city. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you, Councillor Liu. Would any other councillors like to speak to this motion? No, in that case, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. I declare that carried unanimously. We move on to agenda item 6.4, proposed travel. Councillor Raphael Camillo. And I believe, Councillor, we might just give Councillor Camillo a moment to leave.
Sorry, Lord Mayor, I need to declare that I may have a conflict of interest, so I need to leave the room in that item.
Okay. Thank you, Miller. All right, can I please request that a motion be brought up on the screen for councillors and all those attending to see? All right, do we have a mover for this motion on the screen? Thank you, Councillor Leilou. Do we have a seconder for the motion on the screen? Councillor Gladys Liu, thank you. Back to you, Councillor Leilou.
Thank you for the reminder. So yes, happy to support this given that Councillor Camelo, I keep on telling him have a break, but he does not want to, and he still works while he's on holiday, and it just shows the dedication that Councillor Camelo has. He's going to a couple of cities, and I think it is great that he's representing us there, especially some of those old ones that we have a connection with, but also the new ones that we have dealt with, and I look forward to him getting back. For example, Milan, it's a sister city that we have not engaged very frequently. And I think also given that New York, given their recent election, London, I know their Christmas strategy has been amazing. And so the fact that Councillor Camelo is willing to do this is really amazing, and I want to pay tribute to him, but also noting that, noting the India trip that from the Lord Mayor and the Deputy Lord Mayor and Councillor Rouse, given the success from that, the fact that Ruff is doing this for free and he's willing to represent City of Melbourne on those trips, I think is quite important. So all the best to Ruff. I hope the international team will give him all the support that he needs while to do that. And just again, remind him, please take some rest because he's had a very, very productive year.
Thank you, Councillor Leilu. Councillor Liu.
Yeah, well, I'm very happy to second this motion because Councillor Raphael Camelo is going on holidays, but he actually has work in his mind. He wanted to explore what other cities are doing and also learn from them and also showcase what Melbourne has to offer. So this is the kind of dedication that it's very pleasing to see in my colleague, Councillor Camelo. I'm very happy to second that because it will bring benefits to the City of Melbourne. It will help us to know more and help us to show what we have. So we have to offer. So excellent move by Councillor Camelo. Very happy to second it.
Thank you, Councillor Gladys Liu. Any other speakers to this item? Councillor Mark Scott.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just a question. I'm not sure whether that through you to the mover of the motion or to council officers either can reply. Just for those people watching at home or anyone in the media who might be reading this and expressing their views, can we confirm that this motion does not carry any cost to the City of Melbourne Council?
Would an officer like to respond to that?
Thank you, Councillor Scott, for your question. And through you, Lord Mayor, my understanding is that the intention is this trip would not pose a cost to the City of Melbourne. And consistent with our current practices, I believe there would be a report that would come back to Council if that were to be the case. So there would be an ability for the public to be informed of that if that were the case. But my understanding is that the intention is it's not to cost the City of Melbourne at all.
Right, thank you. Do any other councillors want to speak to this item? Councillor Rouse.
Just a question. With the extensive list of cities, are we aware of if there are existing meetings or people to be met over there, or does that process begin after the endorsement of the motion?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Rouse. Through you, Lord Mayor. My understanding is that there's been some preliminary conversations if Council were to approve this recommendation this evening, but as far as anything that's been locked in, that wouldn't occur until the decision of Council was made.
Councillor Gladys Liu.
Yes, one thing I forgot to mention is Councillor Camelo actually did go overseas once a few months ago, and he also provided a report. It was wonderful for what he did. As I said, he's intending to do in this trip. He did it last time. It was fantastic.
Thank you, Councillor Liu. Under our rules, you can't submit twice as a seconder on an item, but thank you anyway for that additional point. Does anybody else wish to speak to this item? No, Philip Lalou. So if there's no other speakers to the motion, I'm going to move the motion. I'm going to put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. I declare that carried unanimously. Please invite Councillor Camillo back into the chamber. And while he's coming in, I'll let you all know the good news that this concludes the reports from management. And yes, Councillor Guest, you have a question?
Just before we close the meeting, I do have a question, yes.
All right.
Well, if I could start with a preamble. You mentioned earlier that it was the first time in 5 years that the City of Melbourne had landed in surplus, and I think that that deserves to be mentioned again. First time in 5 years. We do live in an era where governments are overrun by debts and deficits, and many said we couldn't do it here at the City of Melbourne, but we have landed in surplus, and I think that should be acknowledged as a serious highlight.
All right, thank you.
As we've gone through the year, I'd just like to mention another part, and that's governance, which I feel is a work in progress.
Sorry, Councillor Guest, we're actually just concluding reports from management.
Okay.
This is not
I have a question at the end of it, but we can do it later.
Including remarks or a statement by councillors. So we will need to press on, Councillor Guest.
Okay.
I sense your positivity and I welcome it, but this is not the time in the meeting for those remarks. All right, we move on to general business, and there's no items of general business. We move on to urgent business. Councillor Rouse.
I have an item of urgent business.
Oh, yes, you do indeed. So please, is there And so, all right, David Thompson has indicated to me that there may be an item of general business. Councillor Camillo? Please put your mic. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just to mention, is an item of general business. As you opened the meeting before, and councillors are not allowed to comment, and you make the acknowledgement of the welcome to the country. Lord Mayor, early on in the meeting, you made this acknowledgement following the Victoria Parliament apology to Aboriginals Victoria on the back of the signing of the States Treaty Agreement. Can you please affirm that this was your personal view that was expressed as the council group, has not yet considered the event of today? And I'm not saying I disagree with your comment, but I believe as a council group, we should be given the opportunity to discuss the matter together in the new year. If you could just clarify that, Lord Mayor, thank you.
I can advise Councillor Camillo that I was speaking in a personal capacity as the chair of this meeting, providing an acknowledgement of country and adding to that my reflection on the events in State Parliament today.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
All right, now we move on to urgent business. Councillor Andrew Rouse, do you have an item of urgent business?
Yes, Lord Mayor, and do we need to get a motion on the screen first?
Yes, I think we need a procedural motion to begin.
I'm happy to carry on whilst that happens. This item relates to the improvements along the 57 tram route, and it meets the criteria for consideration as an urgent item of business under Rule 15.8 of the Council's governance rules as it has arisen since the distribution of the agenda, and cannot be safely or conveniently deferred until the next future committee or council meeting, because the opportunity for engagement with state government in relation to this closes on Christmas Eve, and we do not have a council meeting until next year.
Thank you, Councillor Rouse. Do you have a seconder for this?
I have a question for the mover of the procedural motion.
Sure.
What has arisen since the publication of the agenda?
The engagement period and the opening of the engagement period and council laws were not made aware of the proposed changes that state government is proposing until after the closure of agenda items for this meeting.
Thank you. Is there Councillor Camillo, do you have a question? You're the seconder. Great. Okay, moved and seconded. Let's vote on this procedural motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Declare that carried unanimously. Let's move on to urgent business. Councillor Rouse, I believe you have a motion you wish to put to us.
Yes, and can we just
Can we just confirm that it's
slowly
on the screen there?
scroll through, just because there has been some amendments. I think that is the most up-to-date one. Yes, please, Lord Mayor.
That motion, Councillor Rouse.
Since it's
Councillor-
not on the screen all at once, is this in an email or in its entirety, this version?
Yes, shared at 6:17.
Thank you.
All right, so you're moving it. Councillor Camillo, are you seconding? Great. Back to you, Councillor Rouse.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, this motion is pretty self-explanatory. In relation to the changes to Route 57, there's a couple of important things that the community has raised that they're concerned about. And I think it's important that we use the City of Melbourne's resources to ensure that we can get a positive outcome for the community in North and West Melbourne. Specifically, two specific concerns. First of all, the current proposal of works is not for universally accessible tram stops, which has been a consistent bugbear and point raised by the community in North Melbourne. The other issue raised here is, of course, that this is a large upgrade of infrastructure and sits alongside two City of Melbourne projects very close to the Errol Street precinct there as well. And those three items in isolation have the potential to add massive positive benefit to the community. However, collectively, and if not done well in relation to each other, have the possibility of negative impact as well. The motion asks management to work closely with DTP to rework the current proposals. First of all, to minimise heritage impact, the proposal does have multiple areas where heritage will be impacted or removed. However, it also asks management to work with DTP to minimise the reduction of car parks. When you take those three projects in isolation and amalgamate the total number of proposed car parks removed from a high street shopping precinct, that comes to 106, which is clear to understand why some of the shop owners on Errol Street are concerned about the impact of what that will mean for our high street shopping precinct in North Melbourne. It also asks management to investigate the possibility of using 30-kilometre speed limits within the precinct as a means of safety, but also a means of alleviating the need for specific traffic calming infrastructure. City of Yarra has used this quite effectively and has a framework to assess streets for suitability for this as well. And I think there'd be a great opportunity for collaboration and learning from some of their opportunities. It also asks management to go through the specific proposed City of Melbourne projects in the area. Looking through the proposals, there are opportunities there that can rise specifically into the design of some of the tram stops as well. It also asks the Lord Mayor to write to the Minister to ask for an extension of feedback for the public, noting that the feedback time is closing on Christmas Eve, and this is not generally a time for people to be sitting down and going through government proposals at home. They have many more important things to be doing, such as doing Christmas shopping here in the city or spending time with family. It also asks explicitly that the Lord Mayor asks the Minister to ensure that future changes to the tram route are to include universally accessible tram stops, making sure that we're doing this once, doing it properly and minimising the inconvenience to locals. Additionally, and towards the end, it asks management to provide a response back to council on the potential of doing an Errol Street precinct master plan to ensure that future opportunities are done with a big vision for the area. I believe the last such document perhaps is the 2002 greening opportunities along Errol Street, which is still quoted and used in council to this day. It also recognises that as a key stakeholder, the City of Melbourne will ask for additional time to ensure that the submission considers all of these factors and can ensure that we are fighting for the best outcome for the residents and users of Errol Street and, of course, the business owners as well. And also ask that we are able to have the interim consultation report so we can best inform our response to council. This is a big shock for the businesses on Errol Street, and it's a lot to process, and the City of Melbourne absolutely needs to be in there and making sure we're fighting for the best outcome for our businesses, our small businesses, and of course for the residents as well. I commend this motion to my councillor colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor Rouse. Councillor Camillo was second. Did you want to speak to this, or do you have a question?
I have a question, if I could just interject before we go on. I wonder if Councillor Rouse might consider one word in clause 4, so off the screen at the present, about accessible tram stops. For the avoidance of doubt, could we change, how would you feel about changing the word future to the word any? So that it's clear that we don't mean subsequent to the ones now planned, but these ones. Any upgrades to tram stops should be accessible. Do you see what I mean?
Can I just, point of order, can I just clarify if we put any, that would include current and old tram stops, which we won't be able to kind of do it. So
if they're being upgraded, they should be...
To standard.
Yes. So not changing current ones that are not being upgraded, but any time in future that they're being upgraded. Would that assist?
Councillor Rouse?
Whilst I think I'm sympathetic to the intent, I believe it's captured in future, given that you would, if successful, you would write this letter, I would assume, in the coming day or two, and that would include the proposed upgrades. My concern about writing any would be that state government might exclude upgrading certain elements of that would not comply with that.
Okay. Well, it's your motion, Councillor Rouse, so you can accept or not accept the suggestion of a further amendment. I think you're saying to us that you're comfortable with the words as they are. Okay. Back to you, Councillor Camillo, as the seconder, and do you wish to speak to this item?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm going to be very briefly because Councillor Rouse, I just welcome this motion because his concern and worry and the care for the North Melbourne community. And I'm going to be very briefly. So it's just to make sure that this will safeguard the best outcome of this development in the area for the North Melbourne community, especially because I'm portfolio deputy for infrastructure, I could not support this motion. Thank you, Councillor Rouse, for bringing this up and supporting the local community in there.
Thank you, Councillor Camillo, and thank you for your interest and passion in this area. Any other councillors wish to speak to the item? Councillor David Griffiths.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I thank Councillor Rouse and Councillor Camillo for bringing this matter to Council tonight for our consideration. And while I support the bulk of what's included in here, I probably have a few words of warning that I just sort of wanted to voice in the chamber and get on the record, and certainly to put on the record to begin with my excitement that this project is going to happen and that the G-Class trams are coming to the west of Melbourne on the 57 line, which I always describe as my spirit animal, and the 59. These trams will double the capacity of those lines. Twice as many people are going to be able to get on those trams as currently are able, and notwithstanding my support for the obviously universally accessible stops, to make clear that the G-Class trams will be more accessible than the current trams that are running on those lines that have about 3 steps to access them and very narrow doors. So even without those universally accessible stops, this will be an improvement in accessibility on those tram lines. And I think we often come in here and we often ask the state government to do things, and it's good to see that action is being taken. I'm not sure how much I can share with the briefing paper that was circulated to councillors on the 20th of November, which discussed many of these items, which I know is marked not for public release, but I draw to councillors' attention that there is a process in there set out for how the rollout of tram stops will take place in these areas, and I hope that council officers will work with DTP and other organisations in the Errol Street area to come up with the very best outcomes that clearly is the motivation of the mover and seconder. I do also add a little bit of caution around some of the wording around the Queensbury Street and Victoria Street changes, understanding the need to make sure that car parking, which is a very important component of those streets for the local businesses, but also recognising that some of the changes that are being mooted are about protected bike lanes, and that's another consideration that we've had, and I wouldn't want to see us throwing out the baby with the bathwater in terms of coming up with a solution that meets a number of good outcomes, and I think that comes to Councillor Rouse's very sensible point about an overall Errol Street master plan and our need to develop that so that all of these things can be considered alongside each other. The final little exhortation that I'd make to officers in doing this work is obviously to have an eye to the fact that the 57 tram line goes through more than just North Melbourne, that it also makes its way out along Flemington Road and then makes its way down Racecourse Road, which is the boundary of the City of Melbourne, as we've discussed before, that important work that Council has done in preparing the Racecourse Road Strategic Improvement Plan, and to make sure that any changes that are mooted to Racecourse Road are also considered. So while this considers a small portion of the 57 tram line in the City of Melbourne, I hope that officers will take the opportunity to consider all of the 57 tram line. With that, I look forward to shiny, exciting, double-sized trams on the 57 tram line.
Thank you for those remarks, Councillor Griffiths, and I'm sure a lot of that can be picked up in the correspondence, so good that you contributed. All right, are there any other speakers to this item? I think we've got Councillor Guest joining us online. Councillor Guest.
Excuse me.
That's all right.
Yeah, look, just picking up on David's comments and, casual warnings. All information is useful, of course, but someone who lived in the city of Yarra for, I think it was 15 years, I would caution on not just the 30-kilometre shared zones, but also some of those new tram stops. They are the bane of the existence if you speak to the local businesses up and down Bridge Road and Swan Street. They are, whether realistically or not, they are blamed for many of the ills facing the retail sector in Richmond. So I'll just add that for information.
Thank you very much, Councillor Guest. Any other speakers to this item? Does our mover want a right of reply?
I'll just thank my councillor colleagues for their concerns, and I think one of the most powerful parts of this is it asks management to work with the state government, and we can learn from perhaps some of the, dare I say, mistakes or previous designs and iterations that we've seen across the city as well. And of course, I forgot to mention before, as the head of the innovation portfolio, it requests the exploration of new and innovative technologies to alleviate the need for that Melbourne peculiarity, the hook turn as well, which of course is many a frustration for many a visitor coming into Melbourne. I commend this to my councillor colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor Rouse. All right, well, if there are no other speakers of the item, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. I declare that carried unanimously. All right, I believe that was the last vote in the open meeting. Oh no, we've got one more procedural motion to go, and that is we're going to move now to agenda item 9, closure of the open meeting. I call on a councillor.
Lord Mayor?
Yes?
Could I please ask a question of you and the CEO
you
before
may.
we finish?
Please,
Thank you.
Guest.
It is a governance issue, and I would just like to ask it so that it's out in the open and everyone can know that we are on top of it. You may have seen in the press a company called the MA Services Group, which is also affiliated with the Bunjil Group, which provides security services to many, many institutions, and I believe it's also to the City of Melbourne. So in our endeavours to improve our processes in procurement, due diligence and compliance, I would ask, I think first and foremostly to the CEO, but also Lord Mayor, will we make sure in the as we move forward, that we review what associations we do have with these companies. Do we have any existing contracts? And I think as we do this, I hope we can show leadership both throughout the local government sector and beyond. We're not in this alone. There are many people using this firm, but we do need to get to the bottom and understand where our risks, reputational risks lie. So the question is to the CEO, can we ensure that there will be an appropriate review?
Over to you, CEO.
Thank you, Councillor Guest, for your question, and through you, Lord Mayor. Yes, we're aware of the recent reporting in media in relation to the company that you've mentioned, and we are in the process of reviewing to what extent we have relationships with that company, what the nature of the investigation is that's been reported on in the media, and what risks that may or may not present the city. And we're certainly very carefully considering how we best manage that situation moving forward. Thanks, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you, Nick.
All right, thank you. All right, I will request that a motion be put on the screen taking us into confidential. Do we have a mover for this final motion of the open meeting? Thank you, Councillor Camillo, seconded by Councillor Rouse. All those in favour, please raise your hand. There it is, it's passed unanimously. And so I wish to thank members of the public for their interest and attendance and declare the last open meeting of the City of Melbourne for 2025 meeting closed to the public at, I'm going to say it's 1 minute to 7 p.m.